Well, good morning, everybody. This is Casey Jaycox of the Quarterback Dadcast. We're in season 6, and every time so far I've said that, it feels freaking fantastic because we're doing something right. I still can't believe it, but it's true. And now we're on YouTube, everybody, so you can see this crazy bald dude you're staring at. You also see a dude with a hat on backwards, and his name is Nick Hutchinson. And I found we actually got connected through his team, through the wide world of LinkedIn. And what really made me stop and want to talk to Nick is one, just how he communicated, how his team communicated. And one, as a guy who loves to read, I proved that football players can put sentences together and can read without scratch and sniff or braille, but we can, everybody. Heavy sarcasm. But he's the CEO and co-founder of a company called BookThinkers. We're going to learn all about that. He's the author of Rise of the Leader, best-selling author on Amazon. He's a speaker as well. Boston native, but that's not why we're having him on here. We're going to talk to Nick, the dad. We're going to learn how he's working hard to become an ultimate quarterback or leader of his household. And so without further ado, Mr. Hutchinson, welcome to the Quarterback Dadcast.
Casey, I'm excited to be here, and I'd love to ask you the first question today.
Shaking it up. Let's see what you
Let's
got.
shake it up a little bit. As you highlighted, I'm a big fan of books, and as you highlighted, you are a big reader. So I'm curious, what was the best book that you read, let's say over the last 12 months? What comes to mind first?
Probably Cat in the Hat.
Cat in the Hat.
No, I'm joking.
Classic. Something that I still can't get through. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I actually, believe it or not, dude, I'm reading the longest book I've ever read in my entire life right now, and it is like 900 something pages long, and it was so intimidating um, to read. But I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to not read this thing because it was given to me as a gift, and it's freaking fantastic. And I'm going to edit this out because I can't even think of it. It's like by Ken something. It's what's the book's name? It's you know what I'm talking about? It's like this like medieval book. It's
I don't know if I
I
do.
can't believe I'm forgetting the title of it. It's by Ken.
That's what happens when I put you on the spot.
No,
So
it's okay.
feel free to edit it out.
No, I will. It's all right. I edit it. I'll say this. How about the maybe not the last book I've read in the last year or so, but whenever I need like some good reminders of good books, I think of like my Malcolm Gladwell. I think of Lencioni. I just love the way they write from it. It's like it's like nonfiction, but it's like story like fable like, and it's relatable. And the characters are they're made up, but they're like in Lencioni's work, it's very applicable. And I think of like my journey in corporate America, I can relate back to so many of that time. So, how
Yeah,
about you?
Patrick Lencioni, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team is an amazing book. And I love that parable style of writing as well. I think sometimes when I tell people, oh, I read about business and personal development, they assume that's entirely nonfiction, but that's not true. There are wonderful books like The Go-Giver by Bob Berg and John David Mann, Siddhartha, which is it's a spiritual fable, but it teaches life lessons. That's by Herman Hesse. And then books like, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni, another great example of a fable, but it's actually a business book. And then you also mentioned Malcolm Gladwell. He's one of my favorite authors as well. I started my reading journey somewhere early in my reading journey. I started to listen to a lot of Malcolm Gladwell's books. And I love the way that he can take data and stories that already exist out there and then just add commentary around what they mean and how we can apply the lessons from them. And I mean, he's a brilliant human being. I always love every time he puts out a new book, I try to read it.
Have you heard of Michael Gervais?
Michael Gervais, I think so.
So my
He sounds familiar.
so Michael Gervais is an author. He's a former guest and probably one of my bigger guests in season 1. He had a company with Pete Carroll out here in Seattle. I think Compete to Create, and he has a podcast called Finding Mastery, and he actually had Malcolm Gladwell on his show. They did it live in LA, I believe it was in LA, and it was fantastic. And him and Gladwell, it was actually borderline a little tearjerker a little bit because he talked about his dad. Malcolm talked about his dad, and so Malcolm, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on the show, brother. I'm a big fan. So not that he's probably going to listen, but if he does, hopefully his people will reach out. But yeah, Outliers is fantastic. Tipping Point, Blink, they're so good. But real quick thought before I get us back on track here. The you said Bob
Bob
Berg,
Berg.
the Go Giver. So I read that. It's fantastic. It's funny. I one of my keynotes I did maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. That was they'd always use that, and so but they gave me a chance, and they brought. So I wrote a book called Win the Relationship, Not the Deal, and my buddy was the CRO out there, and he goes, "You got to give this guy a chance." And so I went out there, spoke, and it couldn't have gone better. And so like now they use Bob's book and then my book for like new hires. And so obviously super humbling to hear that. But I actually connected with Bob online, shared that story with him, thanked him, just says I was honored to be in the same room as you. And he connected back, which I was kind of surprised, but it was a pretty cool experience to be part of.
Yeah, I'll tell you a quick story about that book and about Bob Berg. And this just highlights, I think how great some authors are like Bob. So when I was in the process of graduating from college, this was back in maybe 2015. I graduated in 2016. I had just gotten into the world of personal development books. But anyway, I was interviewing with a bunch of companies, didn't know where I wanted to work yet. And so I went to this one company in the financial district of Boston. And I remember going up the elevator, went to like the 35th floor or something. And there was this huge office, and I was interviewing for this job. And I noticed the guy had a bunch of red books behind him. Like his bookshelf was full of the same book. And so I brought it up. I said, "Hey, I just got into the world of reading. Why do you have 50 copies of that red book right there?" And he said, "It's called The Go Giver. Have you heard of it?" I said, "No." And so he slid a copy across the desk and he said, "When you come back and you accept our offer, I'd like you to give the copy back." He said, "But between now and then, why don't you go ahead and read it?" So I read the book and I loved it. The Go Giver is such an amazing story. It has 5 core lessons. I won't spoil it for anybody, but you could read the book in a day and it'll just make you feel like $1,000,000. So I didn't end up accepting that job. I actually reached out to the guy on LinkedIn, offered to send him back the book. He didn't want it. It was just kind of a tactic that he used to see if people would follow through and read the book. So a little bit after that, maybe 6 months later, a year later, I'm living down in Florida and I look up Bob Berg and I notice he lives in Florida. So I reached out to him. I thanked him for writing the book and I said, "Hey, if you ever want to meet up for a coffee, I'd be happy to come down and see you." Now, my knowledge of the Florida geography was not great at the time. I was all the way up in Jacksonville, and Bob lived all the way down in Jupiter, Florida. And he said something like, "Sure, let's meet up tomorrow morning at a Dunkin' Donuts in Jupiter at 7 a.m." And I thought, okay, yeah, let's do it. And then I look it up and it's like a 6 hour drive or something like that. So I literally drove throughout the entire night to go meet Bob Berg for coffee. And he stayed for hours talking with me about the concepts of the book, asking me questions. And I'll wrap up the story by saying this. 3 or 4 years later, I started my own podcast, the BookThinkers Life Changing Books podcast. And I invited Bob to come on. And he jumped on that call, and it was as if no time had passed. He started
Mm,
asking me all these intimate follow up questions about really detailed subjects that we talked about years before that, 3, 4 years before that. And it just goes to show like some of these authors, like Bob, they genuinely care. They
yeah.
genuinely listen. They're not writing books just to sell and promote and market themselves and speak on stages. Like they want to create an impact. And when you get a chance to tell them about the impact that they've created, it changes them. So anyway, Bob is just, I'm such a fan of his. So I'm happy that I got a chance to share that story. Thank you for giving me the space.
Yeah, you
And
bet, man.
if you ever want to interview him on here, I'm always happy to reconnect you guys.
Well, let's wait till you go through this journey to get with the next 45 minutes or so, and then if you still want to do that, yeah, I'm always when guests want to introduce other people, it's humbling, and I'd love to talk to him, obviously, just because.
Awesome.
Yeah, cool. Well, we always start out each episode, Nick. Now that we're 8 minutes into, we're going to restart it in. Like, tell me, what are you most grateful for as a dad today?
I am most grateful for my son. My wife and I, we just had our first baby about 10 weeks ago. And every single day I wake up and I have the chance to spend time with him and look at him and observe him and interact with him. And I think it's just one of the, I don't know, it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me in my life. And I'm just so grateful for him every single day. And by the way, gratitude has been a major theme in my life over the last 10 years or so. And so I do practice gratitude out loud in front of him every day. And I tell him that I'm grateful for him every day, even though he might not be able to absorb what that means fully yet, he could feel that energy.
Solid, dude. Yeah, I have a gratitude practice as well every morning. I write down gratitude. Usually, kind of the same line. I usually start. I say, God, thanks for waking me up today. Happy to. I'm so excited to connect people. Like, I mean, I write some other stuff, but like sometimes people want to say, yeah, it's kind of corny, but for whatever reason, for me, it actually subconsciously brings a smile to my face without even knowing it, and it just gets me in the right. And I'm such a habit, discipline, goal guy that like I can't not do it now, and I won't. And in my mind, I'm so now wired that I'm like I can't go work out yet. I can't start email yet. I have to go get the gratitude done, so I'm ready to go. And it just really for me sets the right tone for the day. But for me, what I'm most grateful for today, I'm grateful that we're recording, Nick, in December, as you know, but this episode will come out in January, February next year. And during the holidays, I get my son home from college, which is fantastic. And tonight, my daughter has a high school basketball game, so I'm grateful I get to watch her compete. And it's just like a really, really fun time to have noise in the house. And even last night, my son, his girlfriend, they had buddies over. I mean, I woke up at midnight, go take a little midnight leak, and all of a sudden, the alarm's not set. I'm like, God, there's lights on. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. They're still here at the house. They're watching a movie, hanging out, and so I'm just grateful for the noise in the house. The kids are here, and that's on the other side of your parenthood. You're just starting this, but bro, I remember when I was right at your stage, and my neighbor 2 doors down said, "Man, I just enjoy it because it goes fast." And I remember thinking to myself, like, God, can I just enjoy this? Like, what are you talking about? Like, that was yesterday. I can still see her telling me that. And you'll probably remember, like, I remember I was on that dude's podcast and he told me, like, it's going to go fast. Hopefully you'll remember us talking about this one day because a great quote I heard from somebody says, the days are long, but the years are fast. And it just flies by. So anyway, it's actually kind of exciting because I've actually talked to some new dads as of late, which is fun. I mean, a lot of times we've had a lot of wise dads. Obviously, the episode that came out today, Mike Weinberg, sales expert, sales guru. I mean, he dropped some freaking wisdom bombs on us, which I'm really excited for people to listen to that episode, which will obviously be out by the time this comes out. But bring us inside the Hutchinson huddle. Talk to me about how you and your wife met and for what we can share about your son. He's only 10 weeks old, but tell us a little about him.
Sure. I met my wife, geez, like 7 years ago or something like that at a bar in Boston. So I was out with the guys. It was New Year's Eve. She was out with a couple of her friends. And we met, our groups kind of talked to each other. My friends were talking to her friends, and we connected that night. And what's unique about our story is we went different directions after that night for about 2 years. I moved away. I was living in Florida for a little while, which I mentioned before. She stayed up in the Boston area. And then I got a Facebook message from her one day. And it said, "Hey, you popped up on my For You page or my suggested friends page. I thought I would reach out. How is everything going?" And we ended up on a first date, and the rest is history. My wife is amazing. I'm so happy that we ended up together. She makes me a better person. I make her a better person. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. And we decided to start trying for a family earlier this year. And here we are at the end of 2024. Our baby is about 10 weeks old, as I mentioned, and he's been the love of our life. We have such an amazing young man already. He sleeps really well. He's smiley. He doesn't fuss very much. So I know that that's subject to change. I get that advice from a lot of people. As you get used to one version of your baby, just expect another one is right around the corner. But we're just so grateful for the baby we have today. My little bragging point so far is that he's already sleeping for anywhere between 6 to 8, sometimes 8.5 hours during the first stretch each night. And
That's not normal.
that's, yeah, I know it's not normal.
Don't jinx it.
Yeah, I know. I wish I had some real wood around me. I don't think the desk is
I
real wood.
knock for you.
Yeah, you know what? And one of the things that I did to prepare for this was I read a lot of parenting books. I read a lot of books about the birth process and about, early childhood development. And there was a through line, which was if you have calm, stable parents who are organized, you're going to have a calm, stable kid. That a lot of these times when babies are first developing, behaviors are caught, not taught. So if there's a lot of nervous, chaotic, disorganized energy, the baby is going to replicate a lot of that. So we were really conscious to bring him into a calm, loving environment. And I don't know if that's directly related to how great of a sleeper he is so far, but we really focused on making sure that we would set up an environment that would enable us to feel good and calm and safe so that he would feel the same way.
Yeah, the schedule was our best friend, and we had friends that just like, gotta be flexible. I'm like, no, you don't. Like for us, it was we were so regimented with that. Like, I mean, obviously sometimes you got to break it, but schedule created consistency. Just like when you go to work, hey, gonna meet me at 8:30 workout. Perfect. I'll see you at 8:30. Hey, I gotta work from 8 to 5. Great. Now I know, like, we were setting expectations. He understood what to expect. He knew that lunch was this time, dinner was this time, and exactly, like, behaviors are caught and taught. And now if I'm freaking out and dropping F bombs and GD bombs, he's gonna be scared. But staying calm, and I totally agree with that guidance you got or read, and that schedule for us was the best advice that because we followed it. And we could go to restaurants and our kids weren't acting like Hell's Angels and freaking out and running around. They were well behaved, and but that's because that's how we taught them at home. We didn't allow them to run around the house at dinner table like, no, this is dinner time, kids. And so
Just a fun observation on that. In the world of personal development and business reading, of which I'm in all day, every day, oftentimes you hear that money is a multiplier. So if you're not a good person and you get a lot of money, it'll only make your life more chaotic. But if you are a good person and you're focused on impact and charitable contributions and things like that, as you get more money, you'll become a better person. And I almost feel like having a kid is sort of the same way. Like if your lifestyle is calm and organized, having a kid will only force you to be more calm and more organized. But if you're chaotic and your household's a mess, it'll only amplify that. So having a kid feels like an amplifier in the same way that they say money is an amplifier.
yeah, and a lot of those things you just talked about are choices. We have control over those things you just mentioned, and a lot of times people don't think you do, but like, I'm big into the power of the word I will. Something I teach with, like, the work I do as a sales leadership coach. And so many times I find people use anxiety based language like, I need to get organized, or I have to start being organized, or I should really get my kid on a schedule. Then do it. What's stopping you? Like, there's people out there that do it, and if you need help, ask for help. And so I think, like, I always in my mind have trained myself to realize there's always seven levels way above any level I'm ever at. Like, whoa, that person's a beast, or that guy's a great dad. How did he think about that? I never thought about that. And so when you surround yourself with people who are doing things you like maybe want to do, I love, like, the power of curiosity and asking them questions. And when I know I'm not my best version of a dad I want to be, I I work hard not to get defensive. I work hard not to say, like, man, is that your best version of you, dude? And then just ask for help, whether it's my wife, which sometimes dads don't want to do because our male ego gets in the way. But sometimes I think, like Ryan Holiday, we've talked about him before, Ego is the Enemy, great book, where when you embrace vulnerability, when you embrace humility, when you embrace curiosity as a dad, and just from a growth perspective, like, those, in my mind, my experience, 48 years of life, those are superpowers. I totally believe that. So
Yeah, I think so too. And you just brought up Ryan Holiday. I wanted to tell you a little bit about kind of the intersection between Stoic philosophy and parenting that I've experienced so far. One of Ryan's books is called Stillness is the Key. And there's a word in there. It's an ancient Greek word, ataraxia, which I actually have tattooed on my left wrist. And it translates to stillness. And so, one of the biggest changes that I've made in my own life over the last 10 years, and I think it's helped me become a better parent so far, is focusing on stillness. That space between an input to my brain and my ability to react to it and get a little bit more processing time between that input and the response. You could call it emotional intelligence, you could call it maturity, you could call it mental processing time, whatever you want to call it. And I've tried my best to be less emotionally reactive and more logical. And it's really translated to the parenting side of things so far. I mean, I read and heard so many horror stories of young dads just at their wits end all the time. Oh, there's just like the kids crying, can't put them down, can't figure out what's wrong, not sleeping. And I didn't want to be like that. So I really focused on making sure that I could process with logic and less emotion. And so far, so good. I haven't had any of those moments yet. And I think it's because, I mean, really for 10 years, I've been practicing some type of daily meditation or gratitude practice. But that's been really helpful so far. I think working on myself has helped me become a better parent. And I know I'm only 10 weeks in, so there's probably people rolling their eyes like, oh yeah, you just wait, buddy. But it's the same in business and the same in your relationship. I think it can translate to parenting.
Well, I think there's probably some truth in both of that. There's probably some truth in people that are like, oh, that's young daddy. What is he talking about? But there's also some truth in, well, if you're going to roll your eyes, what are you doing to help yourself? What are you doing to look yourself in the mirror as a dad? What are you doing to look yourself as a husband, as a friend, as a like one of my friends, kind of Matt Miller, he was a former guest. One of the most fantastic things I took out of his episode was he asked his kids and wife a question. He said, "Tell me how I can be a better dad this week. Tell me how I can be a better husband this week." And it wasn't just a BS. It was like, no, he wanted to know. And so sometimes like dads, like try it. Like you'll surprise your kids. Like, Dad, you all right? Man, you on drugs? Like, what's going on with you? Like, but if you're curious and you want to get better, and because you have a choice, like life, like the old Ferris Bueller, life goes a little fast, or it might just fly right by you, whatever that quote is. But like sometimes just slowing down to ask a question on how we can get better as a dad, it's just, and every episode I've done, Nick, is different. And this is definitely one this is why we don't have a script. We're going to go all over the board here, but I'll bring us back because I want to learn more about you and how you got into what you're doing. But I hope that, like, just because I might have older kids than you doesn't mean I can't learn from you. Like there's every generation is going to teach us something. So I hope that people are taking notes like I am. And as you listen to this, because I may take notes every episode, and I feel like I've said this before, I'll say it again. I feel like I get free therapy through every episode. But anyway, I want to go back in time, Nick, and I want to learn about you, Nick, the kid. And I want to learn about how Nick's parents impacted you. And what were some of those core values that you were taught that you'll bring into your son's life?
I will address that question. I just want to highlight that I'm taking notes as well. So I wrote down, what can I do to be a better dad this week? And I would imagine that as my son Levi grows over the next few years, I'll get some very interesting answers from him. Uh, maybe like 3 or 4 years from now, Dad, you could be a better dad if you brought me to the park more often or
Yeah.
something, and just see how that matures. So I'm going to start asking that of my wife and of my son, and just see what comes up. Um, okay, so I had the best childhood ever, and I have the best parents ever. I'm happy to brag about that. I grew up in sort of a white picket fence environment in the suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts, kind of middle class, upper middle class family. We always had presents under the tree, and we never worried about where food was coming from. My parents instilled a lot of work ethic in me when I was younger, but also unconditional love and support. My dad's dad was in the military. And so my dad brought a lot of that kind of disciplined energy to our household. Things were pretty strict. For instance, I never heard my dad swear, not a single time my entire childhood. I mean, from the time that I was born until the time I went to college, I literally did not hear a swear word come out of his mouth. And it was also not acceptable for us to swear. He used to say, people who swear aren't intelligent enough to find another way to say what they're trying to say. He's like, use your brain. So that was kind of the energy that he brought. And then my mom, just on the unconditional love side of things, it was so hard to think about disrespecting her in any way, shape, or form because she was stern. Like we had values. We went to church every Sunday. You know, um, we were good people. We were altruistic. We were giving. But at the same time, like there were rules, and you would just feel so bad even thinking about crossing those rules because she was just so loving. Like, how could you do that to her? Um, so I really love both of them. I love what I learned from both of them. And, whether it was the encouragement in school or the encouragement in sports, they were always praising our effort, not our results. It's just so many of the things that I read about in these parenting books. I'm like, you know what? My parents did that. And oftentimes I'll hear friends of mine who are starting to have kids now that I'm 30 years old, and a lot of my friends are kind of in the same stage of life I am. You'll hear, I'm going to do things differently. Here's what I'm going to do differently. And I keep telling people, I'm like, I'm trying to just replicate what my parents did. That's what I'm trying to do. So today, I'm the oldest of four boys. I'm 30. They're all in their late 20s. And we're just like the tightest family unit that you can get. We still try to meet up almost every Sunday for a family dinner, and our new families are coming together for that. We do holidays together. There's never any animosity or bickering or differences in views. We're always curious and open and willing to talk. And my parents have shifted more into a friend role. This last Christmas, my wife and I gifted them tickets to Iceland, and we brought them to Iceland with us. We got to hang out with them for an entire week as friends, not as a parent-child relationship. And so one of the reasons that I want to have a big family is because I want to recreate when I'm 60 what my parents have today, which is a group of loving, supporting children who are all independent and doing really well, but still come together and form that family unit. And so I'll get off my soapbox now, but I'm just, when I look back on my childhood, it was full of a lot of love and a lot of support and a lot of rules
Mm.
that I now look at in hindsight with a lot of respect.
Well, your dad, he might have liked my dad, but he probably wouldn't like my dad. He could drop some amazing GD bombs, Nick, like some amazing GD bombs. And that would be like, and so that was one thing I said I would try not to do is I would not yell G. I'll say, I'll put a little E. God damn it, Casey. Like it was, I mean, he would make us laugh. And then unfortunately, my Uncle Don, rest in peace. My Uncle Don passed away 2 days ago. And, my cousin sent me a text when I found out because he let me know, and I was like, oh, because I mean, I'm kind of lost touch because we're living in different parts of the world. But my uncle was he was such a loving guy. He helped me in life, helped my dad in life, helped all, just, I don't know, a lot of positivities I have from my relationship. But my cousin sent me a text that just said, God damn it, Casey. And in all caps, and we were laughing. And so but, to your point, I mean, dropping F bombs in front of your 2-year-old, I don't encourage that. I mean, and you wonder why they drop swear words at recess. Is that the person we want to be? Probably not. Right? I mean, I don't want to judge anybody, but for our family, that's not something we want. And now I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. Now, my son, he might drop, an F bomb and he hooks one out of bounds on the golf course, which, hey, sometimes I do too. So I give him some grace. But well, tell
Yeah,
me
just real quick, Casey, on that subject. It's interesting because a lot of the people that I study and a lot of the people that I look up to and I consume their content, for instance, they're very free with swearing. Like guys like Gary Vee would say that the more you swear, the more transparent you are, and therefore the more people um, can or the faster people can build trust with you. So like there's some evidence actually out there to support that people who swear more often are actually more trusting and trustworthy.
actually believe that too.
Yeah, I'll say what it did for me was it created an awareness. Like I was never allowed to swear in front of my parents and neither were my friends. So if I had people
Solid.
coming over to my house, I didn't want to support my dad or I didn't want to disrespect my dad or my mom. So I would have to tell people, "Hey, at my house, you can't use bad language." Now I was off swearing and having loose lips like when I was at school or in front of them. But now that I've matured a little bit, I think that constant like feeling of being on edge around my friends and my parents at the same time, hoping that they weren't going to slip up or that I wasn't going to slip up. Yeah, it might have been a little bit stressful when I was younger, but that emotional intelligence or that level of awareness has translated into the business world in a positive way. I feel like I'm a little bit more articulate as a result of having to find alternatives to swear words. And I'm also a little bit more aware of how I'm coming across in front of other people because I was always conscious of it. So yeah, it was a strange kind of dynamic in the household, but there were definitely some benefits.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I want to go back to your pops real quick, but I think like when you, sometimes if we overthink as humans, it's not genuine and authentic and people feel it and they sense it right away. And so I was on a podcast this week about authenticity and we talked about like, I always, when I speak, I'll say this kind of like a corny dad joke, but the number one reason to be yourself is everyone else is already taken. So no one's perfect. We're all flawed. That's the one thing we have in common. Even the people that seem perfect, they got flaws. And so, like, I think the sooner that everyone comes to that level of agreement and grace and trust and realness, then I think then it allows us to, like, you as a dad or a husband or a business person or author, whatever your job, janitor, we all got gifts, everybody. And so, like, I think we can just really focus on being yourself, whether it's, so you dropped an F on an accident, whoopsie daisy, right? But I think, like, just getting back to that kind of, maybe to your word, Ryan Holiday, stillness, like just being present in the moment and realizing I'm gonna be my best version of me. And if I'm not, I'll give myself some grace and I'll try to get better, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, absolutely. I think all amazing lessons.
So what did tell me what your mom and dad did for work?
My dad has always been in the footwear and apparel industry. So
Okay.
for ages 0 to 18 or 19, he worked for Adidas, which was always really cool because I matched a little bit too much. I had a little bit too many options in the wardrobe, right? I was always getting samples of things that never launched. And, I had too many Adidas tracksuits for a kid my age, too many different matching shoes. I had every Adidas superstar color option that you could have, right? Those shell toes, like not just white on white or white with black stripes, but white with blue and red and green and orange. And like, it's just so many options because it was all free. And because my name is Nick and I wasn't allowed to wear Nike, I would get picked on every once in a while from kids. They'd call me Nike because I was always in Adidas. But my dad, although he worked for companies like Adidas, he always maintained his own book of business. So he'd always represent a few additional brands as well. He was sort of an independent contractor to companies like that. And so he's a sales guy, conversational, charismatic. I mean, even till this day, that's the first thing people say when they meet him that are my friends or family. They'll say, "Oh, wow, your dad's easy to talk to." So he's just a friendly, kind of upbeat, positive person and loves sports. So that was a big kind of tie in to the athletic footwear and apparel industry is he was always at our games playing sports with us. That was a big overlap with what he did.
Hmm.
Now, my mom was in retail management. So she's worked for a bunch of different companies. But when I was younger, she worked for companies like EMS, which is an outdoor sportswear company, and Hallmark, the greeting card company. So she would always manage either a handful or maybe dozens of different retail locations for different brands in sort of a management position. And so with her, there were always stories about like hiring and firing. What is that like? And what do you look for in candidates? And that also gave me a lot of good structure for how I should present myself because she was getting a lot of good data points. So yeah, that's what they did.
Love it. So military grandpa,
Yep.
strict, stern. We're not dropping F bombs in the house. We got to make sure our friends aren't acting like idiots. But yet you want to be a kid. And you ever heard of the story Todd Marinovich?
Sounds really familiar.
So Todd Marinovich is, I'm not saying your dad was like this, but like he was so strict, couldn't have a candy bar, couldn't eat soda. Like the dude was like trained to be like a Von Drago from like Rocky Four. And he ended up playing quarterback for USC, but then he got to college and then just went off the rails and went bananas. Um, and I think like, so how did you like not do that? Like in like completely like, maybe you accidentally get around the wrong crowd. Your parents sound like fantastic people, but like for parents that are like, well, I want to keep my kid in that zone. But then if I'm too strict, then maybe he's going to rebel or she's going to rebel. And then all of a sudden now I got more problems on my hands. So maybe talk about how did you navigate that as a kid?
Yeah, I think this will be interesting because I haven't really thought about this before, but we can explore it in real time. There was definitely an expectation set by them that their rules applied to their house. And although they'd like us to consider their rules outside of the house, they knew that they didn't have control.
Mm,
So, out of the four of us boys, I'd say three of us stayed in line outside of the house most of the time. And then one of my younger brothers was a little bit more of that rebel. I didn't personally feel the need to rebel for a couple of reasons. I think number one, there was that unconditional love and like openness and conversation. And I didn't feel the need to rebel. It wasn't like you can't swear or else you're going to be grounded forever. It was like you shouldn't swear because it's not a good thing to do. It wasn't like this is our way or the highway. It was just like we're trying to raise good, solid, moral, and ethical people. And there was also kind of a church backbone and component to that too. Also, they were both successful and level-headed in their own right. And so I looked up to them. I wanted to be like them. But that idea that outside of the home, they don't have control, and at the time, like there weren't every little kid didn't have a cell phone. So it wasn't like they had this overarching kind of big brother, like third eye watching you all the time. So
Yeah.
I think in the freedom of my own time and space, like, I probably rebelled in my own little ways here and there, but I didn't feel the need to.
Love it. That's really, I love what your parents did. That's a really well way to say it. They controlled what they could inside the home, but realized they couldn't control outside the home. That if you're going to write one thing down, everybody write that, because like one thing I talk about is expectations and agreements. Expectations sometimes sit in our head, but if we don't have an agreement of what's going to happen, then it's not an agreement. It's just an expectation. I'm going to probably set myself up for false frustration, and I'm going to then be not a good version of myself. And I think like that, I had to learn that as a dad, because sometimes early when we get together for kids or this, and back to I mentioned the schedule, I like in my mind I'd see it go in a perfect way, and it's got to go like this, and I could see it, and then all of a sudden, they called a blitz. They called a blitz. I wasn't ready for that coverage, and sometimes you got to be flexible as a parent. I'm learning that the hard way, but I think being able to talk about it and realizing that back again, we're not all perfect, but we can get a little bit better tomorrow. But I love what your parents said, because that took grace, that took trust, that took maybe some forgiveness, some trust for sure. And kudos to you guys for not doing too taking it too far. Because in the end, I think I've had done episodes of all different things, from youth sports to business to life. I mean, anything you can think of, we talked about. Which has been, you're going to be one of 280 something dads, Nick, that I've talked to, and um, in this journey, there's so much that we don't have control over, like so much. And we try to control it, but we don't. And in the end, they're not going to be who we think they're going to be. They're going to be who they're going to be. And I think that's the one thing I keep learning, to tell myself, like it's their life, not mine. I can help push them. I can help support them. I can help ask questions about what they want to do, but it's their life. And like Mike Weinberg said, one of my favorite things he talked about this episode, obviously said, it came out today on December 12th. His daughter was like a stud architectural student, crazy smart, went to like this most high end architect school. And then 2 years in, she's like, you know what? I'm out. And like so many parents would have probably freaked out. It's like, what? No, you're the smartest kid ever. We spent all this money. He's like, I know. I can tell you're not happy. And then in the end, isn't that what we want, Nick? It's like just a happy kid who is respectful, who is nice, who shows up to work on time. And if you leave somebody like, man, that Nick Hutchinson kid, what a stud. What a nice kid. We want our kids, we want our friends and our people saying that about our kids. And that's really what kind
Right.
of like what I'm trying to do with this podcast, is just help us all remember that as much as we think we have cool jobs at times, our kids don't care. They don't, everybody. What they care about is, hey, does mom and dad love me? Can they get me to practice on time? Are they open? Can I go talk to them? Do they trust me? Do they forgive me? Or are they always yelling at me? Are they on their phone when we go to dinner? Do they say they're going to show up to my concert and then they're late? Things that we have control over. And so I think that's like, my hope is that we can drive in more of that emotional intelligence into dads, to realize there's the things we have control over can make a huge impact in not only your life, your marriage, but how you father your kids.
Yeah, there's so many things that I want to share and respond to. The first is this subject of control. When I was in my late teens and early 20s, I struggled with a lot of ego, and I think a lot of that stemmed from being a little bit of a control freak, wanting to have control, or the insecurity of who I was without control. And so as I got into stoicism, which I'm bringing up again, one of the core tenets of stoicism, which is this ancient philosophy, it started in ancient Greece and then moved to Rome, and now there are Stoics all over the planet. But one of the core tenets is understanding the difference of what you have control over versus what you don't. And that was really difficult for me to understand at first, but then I started to observe the world and I started to realize that a lot of the things that would upset me, that I would get angry towards, or that I would emotionally react to in a negative way were things that I didn't have control over.
Mm-hmm.
Obvious example is the news. You get on the news, it's all negative and divisive, and
Yep.
a political candidate that you don't want to win wins, or, you know, something happens on the other side of the world that's sad, like a tsunami or something, and it makes you upset. And now these things that you literally have zero control over are affecting your emotional state. And I started to realize, well, that's kind of goofy. Why would I let an external reality that has nothing to do with me impact my internal reality? And so as I continued to study Stoicism, I realized that a lot of ego is tied to that sense of control, or at least it was
Mm.
for me. And if I wanted to be a more positive person, if I wanted to be more logical and less emotional, I'd have to start to understand that and practice it. And then in Stoicism, there's this concept of amor fati, which is Latin for a love of one's fate. And it's a Nietzsche concept, Friedrich Nietzsche. And he takes it a step further and he says, after you've distinguished what you have control over versus what you don't have control over, you should actually view everything that's external as either neutral or maybe even positive. And so you should love your fate, however it unrolls. If you don't have control over something, view it in a positive way. And so, how could you view a tsunami on the other side of the world in a positive way? Well, you could focus on gratitude. You could be grateful that you weren't impacted directly by the tsunami. And so you start to shift your perspective a little bit. I also wanted to highlight one other thing, and we'll see if I could tie them together. You talked about forgiveness briefly. And my grandfather on my dad's side, who, like we talked about, was a military guy. He was a full colonel in the US Army. And towards the end of his life, sort of as he was losing it a little bit, he had these Sudoku puzzles. And my grandmother, and I guess my dad and his siblings found this book of Sudoku puzzles after he had passed away. And he had written the same three words on every page. So he wasn't playing the game anymore. He was just writing these three words: kindness, forgiveness, and tenderness. And
I'm gonna write
so
that down
I
again. Kindness, for,
kindness,
forgiveness.
forgiveness, and tenderness.
Okay.
And those were the opposites of how he was perceived and how he lived his life most of the time. And what we all kind of came together to think as a family is that those were characteristics he wished he leaned into a little bit more. That at the end of his life, as he contemplated his entire life and as he faced his mortality, he realized that he should have been a little kinder, he should have forgiven more, and he should have been a little bit more tender in his communication style. And so while discipline and having a rigid kind of strict personality as a parent can lead to a beautiful life, I think that sometimes you need to balance those with the opposites.
Mm.
And that control piece, you have control over forgiveness. You do. You have the ability to forgive.
Yep.
And
Spot
so,
on.
yeah.
Have you read the book Forgiveness by Richard Case?
No.
So it talks about, it's a little bit, has a spiritual tendency note to it, but it talks about, it was really impactful for me in my late 30s. So forgiveness takes you, just me. I mean, sorry, it just takes me. So let's say you piss me off. I'm like, God, not Nick, what an a-hole. I can't, and if I let you frustrate me more, that's on me. That's not on you. So if I say, you know what, Nick, I forgive you, bro. And you're like, what? Who cares? I'm like, I know, but I just want to let you know I've forgiven you. It's out of my body. Now, reconciliation takes you and me. And that's the big difference. That's what the book's about. And so like forgiveness, and it doesn't mean you're going to, and I think one of the best things I took from that book is you're not going to be best friends with everybody. That's okay. There's people in your life that you're supposed to be around, and there's people in your life you're not supposed to be around. Embrace it, own it, control it. And for me, forgiveness is like, no one wakes up in the day thinking, man, that I hope that I frustrate every single person I talk to. And if I do, God, what a great day. Or I hope I let everybody down today. Like no one thinks that way. Right. And so when bad stuff happens, we have a choice to either say, ooh, like when your kid messes up or your wife does something that's frustrating you or your partner, whatever it is, like have some forgiveness, some grace, some forgiveness. And watch your, back to your word, stillness, watch your happiness in your life go up versus always blaming, anger, looking for the worst in people. That goes from like a mindset of scarcity to abundance
Yeah.
quickly. Um, Now we've covered a lot today, brother.
Can I add another comment on forgiveness real quick?
Do it.
In the beginning of one of Don Miguel Ruiz's books, it's either The Four Agreements or The Mastery of Self. He talks about how humans are one of the only animals on the planet that can act and then think about it 1,000 times again later. We're the only animals that punish ourselves for things that happened in the past. Now, yeah, we're the only ones maybe with human consciousness, but the idea that you did something years and years ago and you're still paying for it every day because you haven't forgiven yourself, right? There's forgiving externally, but there's also forgiving internally. It's kind of goofy. And so once you start to think about that, yeah, the weight, as you forgive yourself, the weight starts to disappear. And as you forgive others, the poison stops entering your body. There's that saying like, holding on to a grudge is like drinking poison every day and hoping the other person gets sick from it. So it's irrational when you think about these metaphors. It
Totally.
just frees you up to be a better person.
So good. Spot on. Okay. What would be, I usually ask dads, like, what was, what would be an area of your dad game that it's not quite where you want it, but you're such a younger dad. But I'll ask it anyways. In the 10 weeks that Levi's been around, has there been something yet that you're like, you know what? That side of Nick showed up and I don't like that side of Nick and I'm going to work hard. If he pops up again, and for me, Nick, I'll lead my witness here. My dad was really, really impatient. I'm super competitive, and sometimes the opposite of competitive is impatience. And so I work hard on that all the time. And I've kind of given my wife green light to coach me. Like when that side of Casey comes out, we like, hey, we don't want that dude here, and so it's like, it requires me to check my ego. I'm like, yep, okay, I got you. And maybe I'll remove myself from the room, do what I got to do to get, okay, dad's back. Sorry, guys, that was not me. But like for you, has there been a time yet, or a side of Nick, the dad, that you're going to work hard on to make sure that he doesn't show up?
Yes. So far, now I have a lot of flexibility since I work from home, but I also have a lot of commitments because I'm a small business owner in a growing company with about 10 people on the team now. And so there's a lot of moving parts. And we're towards the end of the year. So I've had some long working days. And sometimes I'll wrap up work and I'll think to myself, I should have been a little bit more present today. I mean, my son is literally in the same house that I'm working. I could have taken a little bit more time to go be present with him. And so I know it's early, but that's something that I'm catching myself with and trying to be a little bit more conscious of.
I'll tell you a quick story as a younger dad. So when my son was um, maybe 1.5 ish, I would get to work in corporate. I'd leave at like 6, so I'm leaving before he wakes up. I'd get home at like 6:45, and he'd go to bed at 7.
Mm.
And I was a top performer at this company for 10 straight years nationally. I left as the firm's all-time leading salesperson history company. I'm like, who cares? No one cares. The company's still in business, right? I tell myself that often to stay grounded. But at that year and a half mark, I remember like just being miserable. I got to a point where I wasn't talking about it. I wasn't asking for help. And I remember finally going to my boss, Aunt, shout out to Angela Veronica. I go, Aunt, this is not working. She's like, what are you talking about? She goes, I'm literally, yeah, like you guys love this. I'm making you guys tons of dough. We're thriving business. Things are great. But Casey, the dad, I don't get to see Ryder. Like 15 minutes a day, that sucks. And she's like, what do you do about it? I'm like, I don't know. I'm asking for help. And so we end up talking through it. She's like, why don't you leave at 4 every day? I'm like, yeah, I don't work for a bank. No offense to the bankers. The bank doesn't, like, we use in the staffing consulting business. And there was like, things would happen at night and we'd keep moving. I'm like, I can't not. She's like, you don't trust the team? I'm like, I trust the team. She's like, you're leaving at 4. There's this thing called a cell phone. If we need you, we're going to call you. But from 5 to 7, take family time. And Nick, when I did that, for my career went to levels I never thought were possible because I was present. I was able to trust my team. I was able to delegate. I was able to get really, really clear with what I expected with agreements. And all of a sudden I trust other people. Their careers went through to do, and it was like this like amazing time in my life, but I was Now, some people might be rolling their eyes at me like, oh, sure, it must be nice. Well, it took effort and time and focus and clarity and great messaging. And some days I wasn't always my best, but like high percent of the time, I got family dinners. I got time with my wife and my son and my daughter. I could go to, sports. I could coach. So I think because the cliche is true. We don't get time back. So I share that with maybe a little, hopefully maybe some inspiration as a younger dad, knowing that there's being present is possible. I know some people don't agree with that. I do. Just takes a choice and a mindset.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful advice. There's a program I'm a part of right now for business owners called Strategic Coach, and one of the first things they tell you, and they say, you're not going to believe this up front, but you will learn it. The fastest way to double your income is to take twice as much time off. And you think, well, how's that possible? And it's through what you highlighted, Casey. It forces you to delegate, it forces you to systemize, and it also helps you to rejuvenate and be more present during the calls that matter the most, the highest leveraged, right? The 80-20 stuff. But I think that's wonderful advice, and thank you for sharing it.
You bet, dude. Well, cool. And so, if you were to summarize what we talked about before we learn more about book thinkers, and we're gonna, because we talked about a lot, and this episode's gone all over the board, which I freaking love. There's no script. It's just about being curious and listening and asking great questions and learning more about how we can be the best dads we can be. But if you were to summarize, Nick, what we talked about, that dads can take from our conversation, they can apply one, two, or three things in their life that you believe through what we talked about, they can be the best quarterback or leader of their home. Tell me what comes to mind.
If we were to summarize things, it's the importance of personal development. It's the idea that you can learn from the experiences of other people and you can apply those things to your own life. And to be the best dad possible is to be the best version of yourself possible. I read a book called 10 Rules for Resilience recently. It's a parenting book on mental toughness by Joe DeSena. And he talks about how there's an epidemic of unhappy, unhealthy kids, and that stems from unhealthy, unhappy parents. And so it's the metaphor we've all heard on the plane. If the plane's going down, you got to put your own oxygen on first so that you can help the person next to you. And I think that in this world of personal development, self-help is not selfish. In fact, it's altruistic. When you help yourself and you focus on yourself and on improving your emotional intelligence, then you will, as a result, be a better dad. Not by focusing on improving your kids' performance, but improving your own performance. It seems like that's the central through line for a lot of the things we talked about today.
Spot on, dude. It's interesting. So when I wrote my book in 2020, like the phrase self-help, I actually don't like. What I like is self-investment.
Mhm.
And so I tried to get Amazon to put it in its own category and create a category like, hey, beat it, dude. But I'm like, but if you again, like I think we've talked about a lot about perspective and mindset. Like self-help is, oh, I'm broken. No, well, how about self-investment? We're going to invest. Why wouldn't you invest in your business? But why wouldn't you invest in yourself? Just like exercise or reading or what I love about this, Nick, is you're a younger dad, but if a younger dad is not too proud to work on oneself, why can't we older dads not work on ourselves? And
Teach an old dog some new tricks.
100%, let's go. Shit, teach us, young buck. Like help us. And I love learning. I'm addicted to it. I love. I just it fills my tank. I love surrounding myself with people that make me feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, wow, okay, that's what the next level looks like. That dude or she was fantastic. Um, okay, so book thinkers. People be like, what the heck is this book thinkers? You got a great Instagram following. You got great work you're doing. I think I'm inspired by folks like at your stage of life because I think you're articulate. You believe what you do matters. You take what you do serious. It shows through. So tell us some more about the business. How can people learn more about you? And then I'd love for you to talk about your book too.
Yeah, amazing. I'll give a little backstory. I was not much of a reader growing up, despite the fact that my parents did read a lot to me when I was younger. I fell into the public school system, and I think in a lot of ways that pushed me away from reading, being judged on my opinions from books through the lens of my teachers and being told what to read instead of choosing what books to read, etc. So I was introduced again to the importance of personal development and reading in my early 20s by a mentor of mine named Kyle. He was at the software company that I was interning at. And he told me, hey, Nick, you're commuting an hour each way to work, 5 days a week. That's 10 hours a week in the car. He said, listening to the same song for the 500th time is not going to improve who you are, but the right personal development podcast or book might. So I started consuming a lot of this information, and it started to change every area of my life. As I admitted before, in my early 20s, I had a lot of ego issues on one side of the spectrum and a lot of insecurities on the other. And so that was a confusing way to operate. But I started to read and implement books by people who have figured out how to navigate these subjects. And so as my life started to stabilize and as my mental headspace started to improve, I started to think, man, I've got to get a lot of my friends and family to start considering the same type of material. And so I started sharing the books I was reading on social media, hoping that my friends and family would start looking at the books that I was reading and maybe consider reading them themselves. And before you know it, I had developed a little bit of a following. Other lifelong learners, people interested in reading and implementing books to improve their lives. So, to make a long story short, as that audience of readers got bigger and bigger, I had authors reaching out to me, asking if I could help promote and market their material. And that's really when the business was born. And if I fast forward until today, we've now got 10 people on the team. We support hundreds of authors a year through services like short form video production, where we fly out and help the authors turn the concepts from their book into video that they can use to positively influence people on social media. We offer podcast booking, where we place authors on shows to tell their story and sell their book. And then we also offer social media book reviews. As you alluded to, I mean, today we reach hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of people in a month through our social media platforms just by sharing books. So we can move some copies that way too. And to wrap up my side of things, over the last few years, because we're serving so many readers, I started to hear a lot of the same questions. Hey, Nick, I'm reading these books, but I'm having a tough time implementing them. Why isn't my life changing? How do I take notes? How do I retain more from the books that I read? And so I decided to write a book that answered all of those questions since I couldn't find one out there. It's called Rise of the Reader: Strategies for Mastering Your Reading Habits and Applying What You Learn. So that book is for personal development junkies that want to get more out of every book that they read, because there's an opportunity cost to not leveraging the strategies that I talk about in there.
It's so good. There's a phrase that hit me. I don't know where I heard it, but a book is a book that goes on a shelf, but a book becomes wisdom when you start applying it. And which means, and now this is like self plug, but like I don't mean this to come across like an egomaniac, but like just through the editing process. I'm sure you went through this. You can let me know if you did or not. But like, so I read my book probably north of 10 times, either just from editing process or when I work with somebody in coaching perspective, maybe I'll reread a chapter, reread a part. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, and I learn from myself, which means I'm flawed just like them, or I have gaps. And like I think like the best books in my experience are like reminders, because we
Yeah,
as humans
like
need to be
accountability partners.
yeah, we need to be reminded of these types of things. So I think it's a really really cool idea. I'll make sure that's linked in the show notes. And I huge congrats to you. I know the effort it took to write a book, the discipline, the hard work. So congrats to you. Congrats on all the success of that book. And I hope that we can send a few more folks your way when they listen to this episode, and hopefully a few more followers to BookThinkers. We hopefully can get a few more dads or moms or grandpas, whoever's listening, invest in themselves. And instead of reading, instead of spending 15 more minutes on Facebook, maybe spend 15 more minutes on 8 pages a night and see what happens to your life. Because I know someone who I read every night, and it's I usually read, like I mentioned, like nonfiction, but I'm in this fiction book. But yeah, I think it's so important. So I think what you said is really, really impactful. All right. If people want to find you, what's the best way? How can I send them to you? What like socials are the best way to connect to you?
Our most vibrant community is on Instagram at BookThinkers, spelled just like it sounds. And what I love to do is play book matchmaker. So if there's anybody listening to the show today and you're like, okay, I get it, books can change lives, but I'm not sure where to start. And I've already read Casey's book, and maybe I'll read your book, Nick, but I'm looking for something different. Shoot me a DM on Instagram. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What problems are you facing? What skills are you looking to improve? And I'll provide a custom book recommendation to you. It's one of my favorite ways to provide a positive impact for our community. And best place to do that is on Instagram.
We will make sure that homework is in the show notes, everybody. I think that's a fantastic idea. And he will do it. I know it. We both follow the mindset of serving people and servant mindset. I call it the boomerang mindset, where I throw boomerangs. I serve people like Nick just talked about, but I don't keep score. And I don't think Nick's going to keep score either. So hold him to the fire, everybody. Follow up. And then when you see this episode go live on Instagram or LinkedIn, leave us a note. Tag him on LinkedIn, tag someone else in the comments of the post so we can get more people reading. I think it's very, very cool. All right, now it's time to go into lightning round. Lightning round, I go random. I'm going to show you the effects of taking too many hits in college, not bong hits, Nick, but football hits. Your job is to answer these questions as quickly as you can. My question, okay. my challenge is to make you laugh.
All right.
Are you ready?
I'm already smiling a little bit, so all right. But yeah,
I just laughed at myself too. Okay. True or false? The best quarterback ever in New England history, New England Patriots, is Steve Grogan.
False.
True or false? Tom Brady wore a neck roll.
False.
Do you know what a neck roll is?
Yeah, like the
horse collar.
You know,
do you remember
thing
Steve
around
Grogan
your shoulder pads.
as a kid?
What'd you say?
Remember Steve Grogan as a kid?
Yeah, I do.
Remember the neck roll?
I do, yeah, like the little thing around the back of the pads, yeah.
So good. I'm glad you remember that. Okay. Tell me, if I went into your phone right now, what would be the one song that the people that work for you be surprised you listen to?
Higher by Creed.
Okay, here we go. If you went on vacation right now, just you and your wife. Sorry, Levi, you're staying home, buddy. Where are we going?
We're going to Medellin, Colombia.
Wow. Okay, I love that. If I was to come to your house for dinner tonight, what would we have?
Chicken and rice almost every night.
There we go. Your favorite comedy movie is?
Ooh, favorite comedy movie is maybe Step Brothers.
Just a drum set.
Yeah.
That is fantastic.
Don't touch my drum set. Yeah.
What is the best piece of advice you wish you would have learned early in your life?
Don't worry, it's all going to work out.
Okay, like that. If there was to be a book written about your life, tell me the title.
Enjoying the Passage of Time.
Okay. Now, Enjoying the Passage of the Time, Nick, is killing it. It's crushing your book. It's crushing my book. It's crushing Bob Berg's book. Every book, it's like absolute killing. So now Hollywood's found out about it. They want to make a movie. You are the casting director. And I need to know who's going to star you in this new critically acclaimed hit new movie on Hollywood.
Well, I guess it depends on when this happens, but maybe Justin Bieber. I mean, we're both tatted. He's a good-looking guy.
You could be a Biebs. I was thinking Biebs or like a Wahlberg, just being a Boston guy.
Yeah, that would be funny to have him. My wife's looking at me. 2 minutes. Yeah, Mark Wahlberg. Yeah, Matt Damon. Somebody like that.
Solid. Okay, last question. I'll let you out of here. Tell me 2 words that describe your wife. Beautiful and patient. Here we go. Lightning round's over. I think I laughed more at my own shenanigans, which is, I think I lose. Nick, this has been fantastic. Getting to know you better. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the conversation, all the wisdom at the ripe old age of maybe 30, 31. But you're inspiring, man. I think what you're doing teaches us all that there's so much knowledge out there, but just takes some time and commitment and focus. And I think when you do that, you will be a better version of yourself. You'll be a better version of a dad out there, which is what we're trying to do, is create better leaders of home. So, brother, appreciate you. Appreciate all the information shared with us today. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for hosting a show that positively impacts every single person that listens to it. And yeah, parenting, like we've talked about, it's a skill set and skills can be improved. And so you can learn from the experiences of others, and your show is a great platform for that. So thank you for being a positive light in this world. And I had a lot of fun today. Appreciate it, man. All right, take it easy.